Identity theft is one of the fastest growing financial crimes in America. And if you want to learn how to prevent it, you need to watch this video. Let me start with a story about one of my colleagues here at Home Security Heroes, Gray. Now, about 10 years ago, he went to pay with check at a convenience store, and after running his identity through a verification process, the store refused to accept his check. So he did what anybody would. He called his bank, and what he heard was really shocking. And it turned out that 12 checks had been written using his name, and a total of $7,500 had been withdrawn from his accounts. So he admits to being a bit of an impulsive spender, but not like this. This was next level. Now, Gray has this moment of realization where it's like, oh my gosh, there's somebody walking around with my same name with access to my checking account, essentially writing checks as if it were me. I have a doppelganger. What do I do? We contacted law enforcement. Luckily, they were able to apprehend the thief, and in the end, he ended up restoring his identity. But Gray is one of the lucky ones because it turns out that only 1 in 700 identity theft suspects are actually caught. So the next logical question is, how the heck did this happen? And it turns out that the company he was working at the time had a data breach, and essentially all of his personal information, including social security number, had been stolen from his employer. And rather than be proactive about it, Gray thought that the situation would somehow resolve itself. He didn't quite realize the extent of the crime, and yeah, sure enough, 2 months later, somebody else was walking around spending Gray's money. Now, that's a painful story with a happy ending. Unfortunately, with identity theft, more often than not, you get no resolution or you get ongoing litigation, and it's just a nightmare. So how do you actually prevent this from happening in the first place? I'm going to explain in this video. The first thing you can do if you're serious about preventing identity theft is consider freezing your credit. Freezing your credit means that nobody, including you, can use your personal information to open a new credit card, to get a home loan, or to do anything else credit related in your name. This is totally free, and if you want to do this, you should do it at Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. These are the 3 major credit bureaus. You have to contact them individually by phone. It will take a little bit of time, probably 20 minutes on average per bureau, but it's well worth doing. You might also consider signing up for a service like Aura. Discounts available in the video description below, where you can freeze your credit at Experian with a click of a button. Importantly, you should also consider doing this for your children. Why? Your children are potentially targets of identity theft. It sounds kind of ridiculous until you realize that children actually don't have established credit histories, and because of this, they're sort of the perfect target for identity theft, because it might be years before it's even realized that their identity has been stolen. So consider freezing your children's credit files as well. Child identity fraud costs U.S. families about $1 billion annually and can cost up to $1,000 per family on average to resolve. So definitely something you want to take seriously. The next thing you're going to want to do is collect your mail daily, and if you're traveling, put a freeze on incoming mail so that it's not going to an empty house. Not all identity theft is high-tech or sophisticated, and sometimes it's simply a matter of somebody going to a mailbox and pulling out sensitive information sent by financial institutions or the government. The next thing you want to do, again, basic, boring, but essential, is review banking statements and credit card statements regularly. Credit card fraud is the most common type of identity theft, so one of the best ways to prevent it is by simply reviewing your statements on a monthly basis. Often what happens is a thief will make a series of small purchases to see if that triggers your detection, and if they go unnoticed, they escalate those purchases, and before you know it, they're buying some ridiculously expensive stuff on your card in your name. Speaking of cards, make a habit of paying with cash or credit cards and try to avoid swiping your debit card when making in-store purchases. Transactions are typically easier to reverse in the form of chargebacks with a credit card than they are with a debit card. Getting back to some of the old school tactics that these dirty identity thieves employ, make sure that if you're throwing out information, or material rather, with personal information on it, even a name and a home address, you're shredding it first. Invest in a paper shredder or maybe a fireplace. The next tip I have for those of you serious about preventing identity theft is to sign up for an ongoing monitoring service like Aura. What Aura's ongoing monitoring capabilities will alert you to is if your information has been exposed in a data breach. You'll get real-time notifications via email and or text if your identity has been compromised, and you can take the corresponding appropriate next steps. For example, personally, I just found out that my passport number had actually been leaked in a data breach with an Indonesian airline, which is strange because I've never actually even flown this airline in my life, so I don't know how they had my information, I guess through a subsidiary, but it was only through Aura's notification that I even knew that my passport number had been breached and was now essentially publicly available on the dark web, and I now know what the corresponding next steps that I need to take are. Thank you, Aura. Next up, use different passwords for different accounts, and don't use a predictable password format. Personally, I'm now using Bitwarden. I used to use LastPass, but I no longer trust them as a company. Bitwarden is open source. I think they have better security protocols in place, and I use them so that I can generate unique passwords for literally every single website I use, so that if one of these websites is breached, and I should say not if, when one of these websites is breached, the damage is limited to only that particular password. Next up, basic, but protect your social security number. If somebody calls from the IRS, ignore them. It's not the IRS calling you, it's a scammer likely out of a call center in India. Just don't reveal your social security number unless you have actually initiated that phone call with the institution that requires it. So any incoming calls asking for personal information, basically just politely hang up and call the institution back at a publicly listed number to make sure that you are actually speaking with the real institution and not somebody who's fake. efficient. Next up, be sure you are reviewing your credit report on a monthly, a quarterly, or at a minimum an annual basis. Personally, I like using Aura. Again, discounts available in the video description below, but you can also go to the individual bureaus themselves, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and request credit reports. It's free, and legally they are obliged to give you this information. I like the simplicity of a software like Aura, and at $9 a month, it's a no-brainer for me personally, but you decide whether you want to go with the software or whether you want to manually request your reports from the 3 main credit bureaus. Up to you. Next up, be sure to install and use a reliable antivirus software. Personally, I use Malwarebytes. A very important tip for those of you serious about preventing identity theft is set up multi-factor authentication on all of your devices. Basically, this gives you a second degree of safety so that if somebody wants to log into your email account, your account at a banking institution, they will also have to verify a text message that's sent to a phone number or a unique code that you're generating using an app like Authy. Personally, I use all of my multi-factor or 2FA authentication via the app Authy. That's what I would recommend. Next up, if you're planning to donate or sell a device, a laptop, a phone, make sure to completely wipe it clean and do a factory reset. Stolen credentials contribute to 82% of data breaches. This is according to the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report. So if you are going to give something to Goodwill, an electronic device to Goodwill, that's great. Certainly appreciate that charitable donation, but do make sure that you have completely wiped the device clean before doing so. Next up, visit opt-out-prescreen.com and opt out of pre-screen credit card offers. A thief could intercept one of these offers and open an account in your name, essentially. You can opt out of pre-screen offers for 5 years, you can opt out permanently, and you can always opt back in at any time. So if you're one of those weirdos out there who likes getting those credit card offers in the mail, then know that you always have the option to opt back in. Those are my recommendations for how to prevent identity theft, but how do you know if you've even been a victim in the first place? In this section, I'm going to explain things you need to be aware of and keep your eye on so that you can be sure that you are not the victim of identity theft. Bad signs, these are things that we don't want to see. 1, email confirmations for purchases that you didn't make. Keep an eye on your email notifications, and if you get a notification for a purchase that you didn't make, well, I think it's pretty obvious that there's some nefarious activity going on. Also, be aware specifically of emails from Best Buy's Geek Squad. There's a lot of fraud perpetrated in the Geek Squad's name, so if you get a Best Buy email, be especially careful. Now, if you start getting bills from companies that you have never heard of and that you have no association with, you might already be a victim of identity theft. Don't ignore this. Instead, report the identity theft immediately. You can do so using this link that you see here on the screen. That's going to allow you to report directly to the U.S. government and consider signing up for a service like Aura, which will better protect you from something like this happening in the future. If you get a credit card that you didn't apply for in the mail, then again, be very skeptical. Assume that your identity might already be compromised. Contact the government and figure out next steps. This is also a good point in the video to note that if you sign up for a service, it could be Aura, it could be Identity Force, it could be any of the identity theft protection services that we cover here at Home Security Heroes. They will come with 24/7 threat resolution specialists who can basically walk you through this process of restoring your identity. So that's something to consider. And again, we'll have resources in the video description below. If a debt collection company is contacting you about a bill that you have no awareness of, then consider that you might already be a victim of identity theft. Do not assume that this message is an error. Instead, contact the agency, request proof of the creditor and the debt within 30 days of your noticing it. Now, if you're getting credit approval or denial emails from accounts you don't recognize, you might already be a victim of identity theft. You're busy, it might be tempting to overlook these, but don't ignore them. Next up, if you are refused a loan or a credit card despite having what you think is a healthy credit score, you might be a victim of identity theft. And this is precisely why ongoing credit monitoring with a service like Aura is very useful, because it's possible that an identity thief is racking up debt in your name, and unless you have that ongoing credit monitoring or you're doing it manually yourself periodically, you might not notice it until you get denied that credit card or home loan application. Next up, if you stop getting statements in the mail for whatever reason, don't overlook this, look into it, because they should be coming monthly like clockwork. And if you've stopped receiving banking statements for a period of time, it's very possible that somebody has changed the name, or rather the address on your account, and you need to look into that. You might also choose to use a service like Aura to monitor public records, so that if somebody has been arrested, say, and use your name as they were being detained, you'll be notified. Identity theft is a nasty problem, and certainly it's one that we hope that nobody watching this video ever has to go through or has gone through, but 1/3 of Americans will experience it at some point in their lifetime. This is why being proactive and considering a service like those mentioned in the video description below could make your life a lot easier in the future. If you want to learn more about particular services we recommend, keep watching. That video is going to play next, and until next time, stay safe.